Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for waiting around. I know, look, we got a hockey game to go watch, surtout l'équipe canadienne, l'équipe des Oilers. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your coverage. Thanks for you at home. As I said, I guess yesterday morning, we're reminded that it was 50 years ago that the G7, or the advanced nations, leading advanced nations that became the G7 got together amidst economic upheaval, stagflation, conflict in the Middle East. Sounds familiar. And they formed what became the G7 with a mission, and when they met in Rambouillet, France. It wasn't a mission to preserve the old order, but to build a new one, one that could withstand shocks, deepen integration and cooperation, and really deliver prosperity for all citizens. And it's a reminder that nostalgia isn't a strategy. We have to change. And at this moment of transformation, we must turn the many challenges into change. We know there can't be security without economic prosperity, no true security without economic prosperity, but also no prosperity without resilience. We're in a world where shocks are flowing across borders, whether it's through climate change, whether it's through conflict, and we know that resilience is built through a combination of tough choices at home and smart cooperation with like-minded countries abroad. And that, in a small way, but building from that, is part of the objective of these meetings. This G7 is to begin to build that new era of cooperation, one that promotes long-term resilience over short-term efficiency. Now, le progrès réalisé à Kananaskis ne marque pas la fin de notre travail, mais plutôt son commencement. J'ai eu des échanges pendant les 2 derniers jours, des échanges productifs avec 21 dirigeants de tous les continents. Over the past few days, Canada has worked with our G7 partners to determine where we can cooperate, build resilience and lasting prosperity. And that's the approach that Canada is taking as we negotiate a new economic and security partnership with the United States. And as I've stressed repeatedly, we will take all the time necessary to do that, but no more. And yesterday, President Trump and I agreed to continue to pursue those negotiations, intensify them towards a deal within the coming 30 days. And so the President and I, as well as our respective cabinet ministers and officials, will remain in close contact in the coming days to deliver on that timeline. Over the past days, also met with global leaders who will help determine what is success in the new global system that will emerge over time. And underpinning each of those discussions was, I stress, Canada's readiness to work to create new international partnerships to promote a world that's more secure, prosperous, just, and free. We're looking to deepen alliances with stable democracies who share our interests, our values, our principles, and who look to lead. We look to lead with many of the resources, including human resources and human capital, that the world wants and the values to which so many aspire. And it's those values of freedom, of democracy, and of justice that are behind Canada's unwavering support for a secure, a free and sovereign Ukraine. And this morning I shared with President Zelensky and G7 partners what Canada is doing moving forward in multiple respects with measures to support Ukraine in its struggle in Russia's unjustified and barbaric war. With our international partners, we're launching a major new package of sanctions on individuals, on companies, on vessels, the Shadow Fleet, to exert maximum pressure on Russia. We're also sending over $2 billion in funding for drones, ammunition, armored vehicles to help Ukrainians defend their territory, as well as a $2.3 billion loan to help rebuild the infrastructure in that country. And I take a moment to reiterate our condolences given the barbarism witnessed overnight. in Kyiv caused by Russia. G7 leaders also reiterated our commitment to the pursuit of peace and stability in the Middle East. Made clear that Iran is the principal source of regional instability and terror. And we've been consistently clear that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. We urge that the resolution of the Iranian crisis leads to a broader de-escalation of hostilities, including a ceasefire in Gaza. Tout au long de ce sommet, nous avons également rassemblé des pays autour des défis et des opportunités les plus urgents de notre époque. Ce sont des domaines qui exigent une coopération internationale et dans lesquels le Canada est bien placé pour jouer un rôle de chef de file. I'm pleased to share that G7 nations in the past 2 days agreed to move forward in cooperation on several key priorities. We're going to work with our partners in the G7 and beyond, a number of the countries are here today, to develop critical metals and minerals in order to build independence from non-market economies. And to that end, we will create a critical minerals production alliance, a G7-led strategic initiative to stockpile and develop critical minerals needed for defense and technology, including a range from germanium, gallium, graphite, rare earths. We also struck several agreements, accords from the aforementioned critical mineral supply chains to adapting, powering, and sharing artificial intelligence, to collaborating on quantum technologies, to preventing, fighting, and recovering from wildfires, something we feel intensely, obviously, here in the prairies, tackling foreign interference and transnational repression, countering migrant smuggling by dismantling transnational organized crime. Next week, we will shift from addressing threats to economic security to addressing threats and addressing issues with respect to global defense and security at the NATO summit and at the Canada-EU summit. We recognize that our leadership will be defined not just by the strength of our values, but the value of our strength. And with that, why don't I take the opportunity to, again, thank you all and open it up for questions. Merci beaucoup. Je suis prêt à vos questions.
Nous allons maintenant procéder à la conférence de presse.
We'll now
proceed to the press conference. Format will be as follows. One question, one follow-up. Format sera... Excuse-moi, juste une question. Le format sera une question par journaliste. First question, première question.
Bonjour, M. Carney. Fanny Olivier de Radio-Canada. Bonjour. Quel était le problème avec la position américaine qui a empêché la signature d'une déclaration commune sur l'Ukraine?
Aucun problème. Il n'y avait aucun problème. Il y avait une déclaration qui est au sein de ma sommaire du président du G7.
Mais il y a
ça existe. Il y avait pour le moment hier soir parce que il y avait des événements tragiques intenses au Moyen-Orient et à ce moment-là, c'était dans un sens plus important d'avoir une déclaration du G7 en ce qui concerne la situation iranienne. Mais il y a, ça existe maintenant, il y a des phrases dans ma déclaration qui indiquent, j'en ai la version, je crois, en français. Je peux le chercher, je peux le lire.
Mais ce n'est pas signé par les États-Unis, M. Carney?
Oh non, les dirigeants du G7 ont exprimé le soutien aux efforts du président Trump en faveur de tout cela. Ça, c'est une déclaration du G7. Nous sommes tout d'accord avec cette déclaration. C'est correct.
Bonjour, M. Carney. Mélanie Marquis de la presse.
Oui.
Qu'est-ce que le départ du président Trump a changé au sommet? Et par extension, qu'est-ce que ça dit sur le G7, le fait que M. Trump préfère aller gérer la crise au Moyen-Orient dans la Situation Room plutôt qu'avec ses partenaires?
C'est difficile de gérer une crise militaire. c'est exceptionnel ici à Kananaskis, en Alberta, mais dans cette situation grave, une situation militaire, une situation très fluide, très volatile, c'était l'opinion de M. Trump que ça vaut mieux d'être à Washington. Et je comprends absolument sa décision. Et, c'est correct. C'est une situation exceptionnelle à ce moment-ci. Hein. OK.
Bonjour, Émilie Bergeron, la presse canadienne. Monsieur Carney, je sais que vous venez de dire que vous mentionnez l'Ukraine dans votre déclaration en tant que présidente du sommet, mais il y a eu des négociations pour avoir une déclaration conjointe entièrement dédiée à la guerre en Ukraine et ça n'a pas eu lieu. Les États-Unis, de ce qu'on a entendu, n'ont pas voulu signer. Alors, qu'est-ce que ça dit sur l'unité au sein du G7?
Rien.
Pourquoi?
Parce que c'est la déclaration dont le résumé de la présidente.
Mais je ne parle pas de ça.
J'étais là, madame. J'étais là. Je suis la présidente. C'est moi la présidente. J'étais là avec Monsieur le Président Trump. Nous avons discuté chaque mot dans cette résumé.
We just get you on English on the lack of a
Mon Dieu. Okay.
it's just because
Just to be clear in English.
Like the joint statement specifically on Ukraine.
The joint statement specifically on
No, it's
Ukraine.
in your presidential statement or your chair statement, but it is not signed by the 7 leaders. Why is that the case? What happened with the United States?
As I said in French, rien, nothing. Okay? This was discussed by all 7 leaders. Well, it's more than 7 because we have the presidents of the European Commission and the presidents of the European Council last night at dinner. These exact words, and they're in my chair's summary. We had, as I said in French, we had a declaration given the exceptional and fast-moving situation in Iran. We concentrated on that, and it's a specific one. I held this for my chair's summary. I honestly, look, there would be, if you want a nuance or if you want a sense, there would be things that some of us, Canada included, would say above and beyond what was said in the chair's summary. But the recognition of the importance of the initiative of President Trump to achieve a lasting peace, absolutely agreed. That we are resolute in pursuing all options to maximize pressure on Russia, including financial sanctions, agreed. That we recognize that Ukraine alone has committed to an unconditional ceasefire, agreed. And that we all agreed that Russia must do the same.
I appreciate the detail in that. I'm going to ask you my question now, if you don't mind. Mike, look.
I thought that wasn't your question. I know, but you asked me just for the. This was the equivalent of en anglais for those who follow Canadian press.
I would call it en anglais plus, but I appreciate that. In your meeting with Prime Minister Modi, I wanted to ask you, what did you say to him about the murder of Canadian Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar?
We have had a discussion, the Prime Minister and I, about the importance of having the law enforcement to law enforcement dialogue, which is not just dialogue, cooperation directly. The importance of addressing transnational repression, as I noted, including when we met, and obviously there is a judicial process that's underway, and I need to be careful about further commentary. En français, nous avons eu une discussion en ce qui concerne la coopération qui continue de l'enforcement de la loi, la lutte contre la répression transnationale. Il y a un processus de loi qui se déroule maintenant et je dois être gardé avec mes mots sur cela.
I just want to be clear, though. Yes or no, did you bring up the murder?
I refer to my previous answer.
Hi, Mr. Carney. JP Tasker from CBC News. How are you?
I'm great.
Okay, good.
Thank you, JP.
President,
How are you, JP?
I'm just fine.
That's good.
Couldn't be better, really. President Trump says...
that was your question.
No, not so fast. President Trump says tariffs are simple, and what you're proposing to resolve the trade dispute is complex. What's he talking about? What have you pitched that's complex?
Complexity is in the eye of the beholder sometimes. Look, we have mutual interests in security, border security, and military security, and in commercial prosperity. And we have a variety of paths of those discussions. The Government of Canada is going to agree only to those things that are fundamentally in the interest of Canada. In many cases, there's alignment with the United States, but not all. And the discussions are continuing. They're productive discussions, but they have more to go. And as I say, they'll take all the time that's necessary, but no more. Thank you.
Good evening, Prime Minister Carney. Justin Ling, freelance. I'm wondering if you can comment about whether or not President Trump and the American delegation pushed to water down language around the Ukrainian joint declaration, the joint declaration on Ukraine. And on top of that, I'm wondering what you make of his comments suggesting that it was personally offensive to Vladimir Putin to kick him out of the G7 after the invasion of Crimea.
The answer to the first, and I will speak, as you may appreciate, Justin, at these events, I speak with President Trump and his equivalents, not the delegations. The language that's in my declaration, directly with President Trump, no adjustments from my fellow leaders. So the consensus around that language. With respect to was it personally? It was personally offensive, as to put it mildly, to the citizens of Ukraine and the inhabitants of Crimea when Russia invaded in 2014, which was the cause of their ejection from the G8.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Christopher Nardi from the National Post. Canada sent mixed messages in the past on our willingness to supply energy to allies, particularly LNG, to our allies in Europe and Asia. So what are you telling our G partners now about what Canada can do to secure supply? And is it very different from your predecessor's message?
I'll just look forward. As you know, or I believe you would, most Canadians do, we view that Canada has a unique opportunity to become an energy superpower. That's in all forms of energy. Would very much, to go to your specific question, would very much include LNG. We're seeing the opening very shortly. We just had opening of one of the major LNG projects, partially Indigenous owned, as you know. LNG Canada is about to be functioning, the largest LNG investment that we've seen. There is more that's possible, and there have been a number of discussions, including here, about potential LNG partnerships. So we look forward to those. As well, there have been a number of discussions, and I'll refer back to one of the decisions at this summit around Canada's immense potential to be a supplier of critical metals and minerals, rare earths. There was, this is my point to bring out my prop, which can you see this? You can't, but this is the magnet that President von der Leyen circulated, which is formed in Estonia by a Canadian company, and it is the only such magnet made outside of China right now. And of course, building that out with rare earth materials in Canada, this is one of many examples that we can supply. So being an energy superpower is conventional, it's critical minerals, it's clean energy, it's nuclear, it's hydro, it's all those aspects. And I would say a tremendous interest in that. And my government, alongside provincial governments, but of course at the core, the private sector is looking forward to developing those in the interests of shared prosperity.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Joanna Smith with The Logic. Yesterday, President Trump, after leaving the summit, told reporters that you had discussed Canada's participation in the Golden Dome defense system.
Yep.
He raised the price tag to $71 billion, or zero if Canada were to...
Is that in Canadian? Or
50 per state, U.S. dollars, I believe.
Well,
and so that he's not the only one sharing that. He said it would be a separate deal from any tariffs deal. What can you share about that discussion and where your thinking is now on that project?
Well, look, a couple of things. One is that And part of the spirit, unfortunately, of these discussions is that the world is a much more dangerous place, and the threats that face Canada, face other countries, have shifted quite dramatically. We can see exactly, unfortunately, in very tragic respects, what's happening in the Middle East as we speak, in terms of threats from ballistic missiles, the necessary to have ballistic missile defense. Canada, our geography is less and less of a shield, of a natural shield in those respects, Russia is an aggressor. Other hostile states are in prospect, terrorist organizations as well. We need to protect ourselves. That's part of the reason why, well, those are the reasons why we've started with the over-the-horizon radar scheme with the Arctic, which is one component of a broader protection that needs to be put in place. There are many reasons why partnering in this case, not all cases, but in this case, partnering with the Americans would make sense. We certainly do already, as you know, in NORAD, and this is a potential extension of that. But these are live, ongoing discussions, you know, we'll continue to pursue them as long as they make sense for Canada.
Bonsoir, M. Carney, Guillaume Saint-Pierre, Journal de Montréal. Oui. Est-ce que M. Trump est revenu encore une fois sur son fantasme là, du 51e État dans vos conversations privées avec lui? Et si oui, qu'est-ce que ça dit sur l'état des négociations et sur le respect? Vous avez beaucoup parlé de respect la dernière semaine et du respect qu'il voue au Canada et à vous-même.
Non, et il y en a beaucoup de respect pour le Canada.
Donc il ne l'a pas mentionné du tout.
Non. Vous êtes déçu, évidemment, mais... Okay.
Hi, Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg. I wanted to ask about this 30-day window now that you've set up with President Trump. Can you explain, was this your idea for a 30-day window, or are you trying to put a deadline in place? And is retaliation still, I mean, do you move to retaliation if this 30 days expires without a deal? What's the rationale here, and what happens if you don't get to a deal?
Well, look, there are many aspects of the relationship with the United States, and many of your good questions have touched on them, from security, border security, commercial, financial, otherwise. We don't want to, with respect to the specifics around specific tariffs, there's a certain amount of information that's necessary. There's certain decisions that can be taken given that information, given the relative perspectives, and quite often in negotiations, having a form of deadline is helpful to concentrate the mind, and that can be the case here. The teams are working well. There's exchange of information, exchange of ideas, and having that focus will be helpful. What was the second part of your question?
Retaliation. You have not retaliated to the doubling of steel and aluminum.
No, we have not yet. We retain the flexibility in order to do so, and we are looking, but I will say one thing which is related to that, which is we are looking very actively about the risks from third-party or third-country flows of steel, and mainly steel, but possibly aluminum, into Canada. And the need to provide protections from that. So we're looking at the modalities and ways of doing that, and we're very alive to that. That's the first. We're also, of course, looking to provide liquidity and other support to the firm. So, look, we have consistently responded in the best interest of the Canadian industry and Canadian workers when there have been these illegal and unjustified tariffs put in place. We do so in a way tailored to each situation. We have multiple tools with which we can respond, and some of those, as this evolves, relate as much to other countries' potential dumping of steel, excess steel into Canada as it does the U.S. So we're looking to calibrate appropriately, but we'll do what's necessary, and in short term. And I wouldn't necessarily look to a 30-day window in that response.
Hi there, Mark Carney with the Globe Mail. On the 30 days, are we expecting to see a full deal announced in 30 days, a blueprint of a deal? And has Donald Trump ever given you any indication that he is willing to remove all tariffs on Canadian goods, as the Canadian delegation and yourself have requested?
Well, it's a negotiation, so that's our position. At present, the United States may have a slightly different position, but we'll pursue one that is in the best interests of certainly Canada and aligned with U.S. interests. Thanks.
Blueprint versus a full deal?
On verra. We'll see. Look, it's we have a full deal. It's called the USMCA. Kuzma here.
Last question.
Yeah.
Good evening, Prime Minister. My name is Gaurav Sawant. I work for India Today in Delhi. Your meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, how would you describe that? And what are concrete steps that you and the Prime Minister of India discussed to take this relationship forward, that it reaches its true potential, sir?
Well, I think the several things, if I may say. I would say the meeting, the fact of the meeting. Let me say a few things. First, just in terms of Prime Minister Modi's attendance at the G7. Prime Minister Modi has attended every G7 since 2018. That is a reflection of the size of the Indian economy, the dynamism of the Indian economy, Indian technology, the leadership position India plays in a host of venues from G20 and beyond. So as chair of the G7, hosting the Prime Minister in that context is entirely natural, entirely consistent. I fully expect the Prime Minister of India will be in attendance at the G7 next year, for example, in France. First thing. Secondly, in terms of the bilateral relationship, which is your question, I think the meeting today was important, but I would describe it as foundational, as a necessary first step, an exchange of views, frank, open exchange of views around law enforcement, transnational repression as two examples, an agreement to provide the necessary foundations to begin to rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect, sovereignty, trust. And that begins with what was agreed, you asked for concrete, which is that we will move to appoint high commissioners again. And let me just finish by putting that in context, which is there are very deep ties of people and businesses between Canada and India. It's well known. It's part of your point about where the relationship could go. And they are not served at present by consular services, in effect, certainly by high commissioners. And it's necessary to have that level of service as a basis on which to build out, again, in the context of respect for sovereignty and to begin to realize the potential of the relationship. And we will, we're both committed to work towards that, but there's a lot of work that will need to be done. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to close. I'm going to make one final comment, if I may. Just this is an ad lib to the question you didn't ask. What was it like in the room? I'll just say this, having been at a number of summits, G7, G20 summits, just to give a bit of a flavor. The advantage of particularly the G7 is that there are only, oddly, 9 people in the room because of the 2 extra not extra Europeans, the right amount of Europeans, but there's 2 other Europeans. And there's 9 people in the room, and they're the principals, they're the leaders, and there is a great amount of direct dialogue and discussion, very frank exchanges, very strategic exchanges, differences of opinion on a number of issues, but from an effort to find common solutions to some of these problems. And that is particularly valuable, in my opinion, and I'm a new leader in this context. I have been around these things, but a new leader in this context, where we had several other new leaders, G7 leaders, because you're building those relationships, you're building those trusts. It will be very valuable, for example, next week when the core of the G7, which was the core of NATO, is together making major decisions on defense and security partnerships. And so the fact that at a time when multilateralism is under great strain, and I'm absolutely clear it is, that we got together, we agreed on a number of areas. The 6 related statements, we agreed on the perspectives on Iran, despite the impressive minutia questions, if I may, on the detail of words around Ukraine. Agreed on that aspect of maximum pressure in variable ways using financial sanctions. That's important, and that's valuable. And so I want to just give you a bit of that flavor. And last thing, I want to pay tribute to our Sherpas, Cindy, for leading this great effort under challenging circumstances in terms of global events and just the nature of bringing it all together. And so now it's probably about 6:30. So I'm hoping when I walk off the stage, the oil is up by 1. At least, no. Okay, just keep me in the zone for a minute. Down by 1. Wow. Okay. Well, it's a long game. We're going to go to OT. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for indulging my little soliloquy at the end. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, ça, c'est la conférence de presse.